This is episode 8 of OverSight, a show which never gets close to 100k views, Monty. It isn't world-renowned in League of Legends. And you know what? People who subscribed to this channel before don't want to see it anymore. So we're officially cancelling the show. We've realised that actually it is incredibly impactful on our lives, whether or not the number below the video says 150,000 or 15,000. And I don't know about you, Monty, but I've tried living on the bread and water that I can afford from the $10 I make from this show. And I need to go back to that, big pimping lifestyle of a whole $78 per show that I was on before. Oh no, wait, actually, no, I've just realized this show isn't my life. Okay, so no, actually, I'm just going to keep doing this show, actually, if it's okay with everyone. So fuck everyone who comes here from League of Legends hoping that we switch back to League of Legends. We didn't. And you're never going to see any more League of Legends shows in the subscription box. So don't unsubscribe, though. Stay subscribed and just get really mad in the comments every time. Right, now that we've got that out of the way, this is how you take care of your fan base.
You could also stay subscribed, watch the show, and appreciate the subtle gameplay of Overwatch instead. Maybe expand your horizons a little bit and then thank us later.
See, that's the sort of sobering yin to my rage yin yang that we've always... That's the synergy we've always had, man. Because I'm very cynical. I don't think they're going to do any of that, quite frankly, Matt. I think they're just going to keep hating the show, not watching Overwatch. And in fact, after watching 1.5 pro Overwatch games about 7 months ago, continue to lecture us about how Overwatch is a shit game and how it will never actually be good to watch. And then they will literally, at the same time they're saying that, alt-tab into a Twitch stream where a Zyra ultimate goes off, throwing up all champions, and it's impossible to see anything happening in a team fight. But they'll all pretend they knew at the split second exactly what was happening, and when Jack breaks it down later, they'll go, yeah, I knew that's what happened. Yes, that's the target you wanted.
Also, they will conveniently ignore the 3 years they spent playing the game to learn all 125 champions' abilities and all 70 items within the game so that they could actually have a basic functional knowledge to even begin to appreciate watching the game instead of just watching CSGO, which is much more intuitive.
Okay, speaking of someone who has acquired a basic fundamental knowledge of Overwatch, we have got Zebbosai, who is the flex player for Misfits. Now, the flex player, sort of the bisexual of the Overwatch world, he goes between whatever he feels like in the moment, whatever he thinks works for him the best. Okay, we had a past, well, I say a past, in the past shows, Zebbosai, we had a Misfits member on the show. I hope I haven't just actually announced there that you have, in fact, cut Reinforce. You heard that story about what happened between me and him. It's sort of played into how your relationship has been with him since then. He's a very messy individual who can't always stay in control of himself. That's why in the game, you just gave him a huge hammer, and that's like all he does is like run around with a huge hammer in front of everyone. But I understand he's a key integral member. Here's where we've got to start, Zebbosai. Being as this season, Misfits didn't have the kind of success you probably wanted in Apex. What are your initial thoughts on Apex? From your perspective.
Well, going into it, we knew Lunatic-Hai and LVW Blue were very strong teams. I don't know, we still thought we'd be able to get out of the group, and there's no excuse that we got a hard group because we had to beat them anyway eventually.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know. We swapped some roles around, so I'm not actually playing Flex anymore. I'm on the support role. So hopefully next time we return to Apex, that will help us.
Yeah. Okay.
You're on Ana, though.
Yeah, I'm playing Ana. I'm not Lucio like I used to.
Sure.
Yes.
So Monty, last season, when they made this change, the guys from Misfits would have hoped that they'd be even better than before because they were making this go. I mean, they obviously had Skipjack still, but they were like, oh, we're going to go to an all Swedish lineup, and hopefully that's the way forwards. What is the difference between last season and this season, do you think, Monty?
I mean, obviously, the Misfits lineup was mostly Tavik and Reinforce and a bunch of French guys last season. So I think that just from talking to people who were involved, this seems like a more natural personality fit for a lot of the players. And the big trade ended up, I think, making all parties stronger in the long run. In and of that, I suppose, like Counter-Strike, you're seeing a lot of these European teams really base themselves around their nationalities and their native languages, which does make it easier and culturally simpler, I think, to integrate. So I think all these things have been positives. I mean, not luminosity, like whatever, whatever happened there, I don't really care about, and I don't think that necessarily made them stronger. But for Rogue and Misfits specifically, it does seem to have worked out for them in a much better way. But I think that if we're comparing last Misfits to this Misfits, obviously with Tvik and Reinforce, not much is going to be changing there, but I think that what they did was they brought a lot of very high-skilled players onto the roster, but did not necessarily know how to allocate those resources because you had so many players that could play flex or DPS that it was a matter of kind of ironing out those roles. And it sounds like even those roles haven't been ironed out because as I understand it right now, at least for the time being, you're playing Ana, and Nevix is now the secondary DPS to Tvik?
Yeah. Nevix is playing DPS with Tvik, and then Maneten is flex.
Okay. So, I don't know. For me, this seems a lot better because I personally thought that Nevix in the past had some extremely good performances on DPS, and I was a bit surprised that he was being put into the honor role. Can you explain why why you set up the roles initially the way you did?
Because we felt like Ana is one of the most important classes to have. And then
Sure.
Nevix only ever played Ana. Whenever he played rank, he only played Ana. And he got 2 accounts, 1 and 2.
Fair
so
enough.
he's really good with it. But then, he's good Ana mechanically, but he isn't a very vocal player. And as an Ana, you kind of need to let your DPS know that they're supported. They can overextend, they can go in. Because the Ana will have their back. And then it ended up being mostly me and Reinforce calling, but we were both in the front line, so we never knew. Playing Lunatic-Hai, Eska and Who Are You could go on Nevix, but we didn't actually even know that. So we just felt we had to spread the communication a lot more.
Okay, so
the back line more and then reinforce the front line.
So mostly a communication issue then, interestingly, as opposed to a skill issue.
Skill-wise, probably better than me.
Okay, I see that now. And obviously for you, you're a natural choice. I mean, you have played a lot of these hit scan snipers. I mean, we see you flexing into Widowmaker on a lot of these maps, so the skill set comes naturally to you mechanically. Holy shit, my cat is being so annoying. It comes more naturally to you mechanically, and so this is a better fit for you because you're more talkative and you already have those mechanics down.
Yeah, and then I think a big thing that people don't really think of is Maneten is probably the most inexperienced guy. So whenever he was on DPS, or at least especially with the hit scan role, he'd be a bit inconsistent. Some games he'd just win for us alone pretty much, but then other games he wouldn't show up at all. But on the flex role, he has a ton of experience playing Roadhog and Sora for the old Luminosity lineup. So he's on a role that suits him better too. And I'd say Nevix is as well, because this way we can actually use Tvik on Tracer, and then Nevix plays Genji. And Tvik is a really, really good Tracer, but we couldn't really do that before because Maneten didn't play Genji. So this just opens up so much for us.
Okay, so when you made this roster move, I mean, just by the fact that the French players went to the French players and the Swedish players went to the Swedish players, was it actually some sort of cultural harmony that you were seeking in doing this move? I mean, it can't have just been skill because you didn't literally just pick the most skilled players.
Well, I don't know, with the Misfits at least, sure, we won DreamHack and then split 2 days after, but going into DreamHack, we just hated playing, we hated each other. It didn't work at all. I look at this Misfits now, and it's stronger than the old Misfits. Sure, we haven't won anything, but we've been playing a lot better teams, and I think that's the reason. If we were playing a DreamHack with this lineup, we win easily.
Okay. So what has the Apex experience been like for you then? Since obviously, it was the other half of the team that was playing last time.
Well, yeah, exactly. Last time was Tvik and Reinforced. The rest of us hasn't been there before, but the Apex experience was good. We got a lot of practice in. I like that you can prepare for a game for such a long time. Looking back, when we were preparing for both Red and Lunatic-Hai, we just played the same comps over and over again for months. When, I don't know, it probably didn't benefit us because we tried to stick with triple tank because we felt that suited us best. But now back in Europe, when we play dive, we don't try to counter dive with a triple tank. We play more flanking heroes that can pressure their backline and stuff. Because whenever we played Lunatic-Hai, Jong was just free all the time. But I think we just learned a lot from the months we were in Korea. Like, if we ever got the chance again, I think we could prepare a lot better for the games than we did last time.
Okay. Monty, what do you think about that kind of meta change that they went with there?
Well, I think that first off, the patch has changed. So part of this is that we haven't actually gotten to patch 1.8 in Korea yet. So what the kind of the meta he's talking about practicing now is not actually the meta that's happening in the current Korean scene. So it's a little early for me to comment on that because it hasn't shown up beyond these more online tournaments. So, but I will say that out of the comment that the Misfits improved a lot was definitely true. I do think that some of the limitations were that you guys played like a lot of Roadhog, and Roadhog was obviously strong, but it didn't give you that same flexibility, which is interesting to hear about the changes to the role situation, and that because Nevix can play Genji, it has opened up a lot more possible combinations for you in terms of the actual hero compositions that you can actually play. So I don't know, though. I think that for the most part, for you guys, talking to Reinforce, talking to you guys, it seemed like a lot of it was that you were having a hard time getting practice in Europe beforehand. So it was hard for you to prep coming in. So you weren't really at the level you wanted to be heading into Apex. And it sort of took you a while to get moving and practice in Korea until you could actually reach actually start improving dramatically. Is that true?
Yeah, like even in Korea, I think the hardest teams to prepare for are Lunatic-Hai and EF Red because they play this unique dive. Or like a lot of teams dive in Korea, but then like the closest is probably Runaway. But when they dive, they usually do it with a Reinhardt, so it's not as hard. Like they play around the Reinhardt and Huxley is more flanking, while Lunatic-Hai will just go at you. They don't stop. So just preparing for that game in general was very hard for us, and then the practice in Europe was garbage beforehand.
Okay.
Why was it garbage?
Because we'd only play NIP, and all they did was play tank. So.
So not the style you needed to practice against to prepare for the Koreans before you came. Where was Rogue during this time? This was before they were in Las Vegas, right?
Yeah, I think they took like a long break because we only played them once during that time. I don't think they practiced that much.
It was over the holidays, to be fair.
Exactly. Yeah, it was.
So you guys had much more motivation out of European teams to play than most other teams did at the time, and still do. I mean, although it seems like, are you guys going to be moving to the US?
Well, eventually, I guess if we get a spot to Overwatch League, but we're not going to move over there, like unless we get a spot in Overwatch League or like when it begins, because at the moment we actually feel that practice in Europe is probably better than it is in NAS, at least as long as we have United here. Because I don't know, I think like I just been looking at some of the NA teams play, and I don't think they look very impressive at all. Like skill wise, the Europeans I feel are so much stronger. Like sure, Selfless, Rogue, Envious, maybe Cloud9 would be good practice in NA, but it's not worth moving over, even though it might be slightly better.
Are we still allowed to keep calling Envious an NA team? You mean just because they're over in NA? Right?
Yeah, just because they're in NA.
And Rogue.
That does trigger me when people
too.
keep saying that. Okay.
Shouldn't it trigger you about Rogue also?
He just said they're taking time off, mate. They're not doing anything.
No.
They're eating burgers.
No, they're in North America now. But
so you've got to actually be playing. So so obviously before you went to Apex, you did play that IEM tournament. So you had played Lunatic-Hai, but coming into Apex, did you actually think that like the stories about the Koreans and just watching them, that like the Western teams from season 1, like they just overhyped the Koreans? Like, did you actually know the Koreans would be as good as they were when you got to Apex season 2?
In Apex season 1, a lot of the teams did look pretty bad. Like they've improved a lot.
Yeah.
But then like we got the feel of the Koreans at IM, obviously. But then like I did think we'd be able to beat Lunatic-Hai and LV Blue. I knew we were gonna struggle because they have a lot of depth to the lineup. They can play a lot of different comps, but with Lunatic-Hai, we knew exactly what they were gonna do.
Okay.
So in theory, we should be able to beat them just because we can prepare for so long. But then they're just so good at their style, so I guess that surprised me a little.
By the way, Monty, when he keeps saying LV Blue, he means LW Blue, because in Sweden they deny the existence of the letter W. It's just V, okay? So just keeping everyone up to date on that, okay? As we go forwards. I mean, funnily enough, though, he does call him Nevix, though, so Yeah, shouldn't that be like Noix or something? Why is there no change around there? But anyway, we'll ignore that. So, when you were obviously usually the teams that go to Korea, you practice teams that are not in your group. Did you actually scrim against Meta Athena?
Yeah, we practiced Athena probably the most out of all the Korean teams.
What do you think of them then? So obviously they were coming into this season, the first season, and they've done so fantastically.
Well, at the beginning, when we played them, they just pounded us. We had like no chance. But then I think they are one of the teams that, like, as long as you figure out what they're kind of doing, you can beat them pretty consistently. But you need to have some experience with them, or at least have footage of them so you can study them.
Okay.
Because like they will just babysit Hoon all the time. You shouldn't focus him at all. You shouldn't like even look at him. And then like you gotta be prepared for the flanks. Obviously, like they do flanking routes all the time with like their whole team, and they do a lot of niche Bastion, Sombra, May picks. That like you need experience or at least have seen. I think to be able to beat. I think that's why they're doing so good right now.
So I've seen some of the interviews you've done, Zebbosai. You seem like a very cerebral player, and it's true that it's possible to figure out how to do something even if you can't do it. Why do you think no one has managed to beat Meta Athena then so far?
Well, I don't know how much, like, because this May thing they did lost. I don't remember who they played. Like, was it Katie Pantera or something?
Yeah, Pantera,
like,
right?
I knew they
the one
they
on Numbani.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
like I know they prepared that for Envious as well. So like I don't know if people have actually seen the things they've prepared. Like this didn't work out at all, obviously. But then the Sombra thing, the same on Hanamura, I don't think people have seen it before, so they're not prepared. I guess like now most of their niche stuff are out there. Like they've done most now in Apex.
I mean,
so
but you think that, but that's only the stuff that maybe you've seen from practicing against them, and it's been weeks since you left, so who knows exactly what they've got up their sleeve. They could have a lot more tricks. Did you see the one that they did on Eichenwald with the double boost around the wall into the back?
Then boost McCree? Or you just walk up the right stairs and boost up?
Yeah, and then over the wall towards the second point.
I've seen that. And then they also go up on the tower, they boost their McCree with a high noon.
Yep.
Yeah.
So have they actually done some of this against you in scrims then?
Yeah, we've seen all of it in scrims. That's why I think we were
so
like we could consistently beat them towards them.
And was it surprising you then that no one else was aware of this then?
No, because I don't know, we don't talk about what they did in scrims.
Oh, okay. There's actually honor among teams. Okay.
I think there is.
Okay.
But I don't know. Like they are very gimmicky. As long as you figure out their style, I think you can consistently beat them.
So when you said you were consistently beating them in scrims, and you did this by not focusing Hoon, are there compositions that you thought were effective against them? Because for me, with the way they play and how far Hoon is always forward, I wonder why more people don't play May against them and just wall him off from the rest of his team and just kill him. Because he can't really stay alive without all the support that he's getting with how aggressively he's playing forward on the Zarya.
Yeah, May could definitely work because like Hoon does get every resource they have. Like when we play them too, they played a lot of Zarya Diva, which from what I've seen they've moved away from a bit. They don't play as much Diva. But the key for us to beating them was focusing their hit scan. Saya player, I think it's called.
Yeah.
And then obviously Diana, just pressure them. And as soon as we have cleaned up those kills, we could turn around and get Hoon.
Okay. That's interesting. Which teams? Okay, so obviously you guys aren't going to play it again in this patch anyway against this team. It'll be a while before you play them again. Which teams at the moment in Apex do you think could actually have like the skill set to beat them? Who do you think could beat Meta Athena at this point?
I think all of them can. Like now at least, like Lunatic-Hai Runaway.
They're going to be playing Lunatic-Hai, so that's the thing is that if you actually think about it, so when you talk about them having pressure on the supports and the backline as a way to beat them, if you actually think about the teams that they've been playing so far, and the teams that they've won against, so Envy, they don't play dive, right? Yeah. Africa Blue is not very good.
They play dive, but they're shit with it.
Yeah, exactly. They don't play it very well. And also, they don't Yeah, they they play less Genji Tracer, but instead they play a lot more like Genji McCree or Genji Soldier, which means that they don't have always the same pressure as like a Lunatic-Hai will have on your backline. And then they play Kongdu Panthera, which also doesn't really play a lot of dive compositions. They played a yeah, they're mostly a tank team. So what's weird about their run against like the three best teams that they've played, which are Envy, Africa Blue, and Kongdu Panthera, they still haven't faced like a really sick dive team that they played against at a high level.
If Panthera had lost that series to LW Blue and we'd seen LW Blue play them, we might have already seen them tested.
Possibly, yeah. But the thing is that they are in a semifinal match now against Lunatic-Hai, so we are definitely going to see them play a very good dive team for the first time. That's an interesting take on it, Zebbosai, from what you're describing.
I definitely think Lunatic-Hai has, like, they're the favorites in that game for sure. And then I don't know what happened with LV Blue, but whenever we scrimmed them, like, we had no chance. Like, I don't really know what happens when they go on the stage. Like, they're so good in practice. It's crazy.
I don't really understand either, because it seems like from watching teams play in a lot of esports, they have a lot of the signature problems of communication breakdown on stage, because they start off and it looks like they're doing really, really well at the start of the match, and they're all very coordinated. But it seems like by game 3 or game 4, like they just stop talking to each other because all the coordination just suddenly falls apart. They're all over the place on the map. They're not having the same clean style of player initiation any longer. And it's not that the other team is doing anything necessarily different. It's just that their concentration or their tilting or somehow they're just not having that same level of constant communication any longer. So it's been weird to watch LW Blue in the playoffs because I didn't really expect that to be happening.
I think a big thing too is like, at least when we played them, Meko was like super, like he was so good with D.Va. But lately I've seen them like move away from the D.Va, and I don't know.
He's playing mostly Zarya.
Yeah, and I don't think he's that talented, or like he's obviously good with Zarya, but he's not as good as he was on D.Va, because he's like he do shit no other D.Va could. He was like so good with the hero.
Interesting. Because I think, for me, when I look at Meko, and especially the series against Kongdu Panthera, he showed up in a really big way in games 1 and 2, but he just didn't exist, basically, for the rest of the series. He was one of the ones that had a very high peak in the first 2 games, and then just you didn't really see him do anything for the last 3, which was one of the weirder disappointments of watching that best of 5 from an LW Blue perspective. So I don't really know what's going on with him. He seems really inconsistent as a player.
What do you actually think when the two teams rematch? Like, do you think that LW Blue will win this one?
LV Blue versus
Kongdu
Panthera. I think they should. Like, when you look at them in practice, they should beat all these teams pretty easily. But then, as I said, I really don't know what happens to them when they go on stage.
So to you, they're like the number one team as long as it's in practice.
Yeah, pretty much. Especially their Tracer player. I can't remember his name now. Like
Sabielby.
Yeah.
Sabielby.
Like,
yeah.
Insane.
He's really good.
Practice. Like, but then, or like, I don't get to see a lot of first-person view, obviously, when they play a game. Yeah. But just looking at it, his aim doesn't look like that impressive compared to when he's practicing. Like, you get one clip that's support all the time whenever it's practice. I think the only player that doesn't really get affected is Flower. He always seems to show up.
Yeah.
I think that LW Blue will probably win because when we saw Kongdu Panthera play against Meta Athena, what Meta Athena did really well was show a lot of Kongdu Panthera's weaknesses, and they focused Evermore. They watched the previous match of LW Blue, and they just said, fuck it. Evermore just carried this team in the last 3 games to actually win versus LW Blue. What happens if we just put all of our resources into shutting him down? Where Evermore never really on the Roadhog had a time to get into position for hooks because Saya player was on the Tracer and constantly just harassing him. So if you watch the way that Evermore was playing against LW Blue, he had so much time to walk forward, hide in a corner, hide under an overhang, wait for a drop down from LW Blue, get the crucial pick, and then the payload or whatever would keep on rolling, right? And he never really had that opportunity when they played against Meta Athena, because Meta Athena would, instead of allowing him to do that, they would just play Tracer and they would pulse bomb him, and they wouldn't kill him, but they would stop him. He'd have to take a breather or get healed up, and he could never actually walk into the places that he needed to in order to make a pick. So they controlled his positioning by constantly harassing him with Tracer. And what you're saying about Sabiolbi is, Sabiolbi, interestingly, in their first series against Kongdu Panthera, only spent about 12% of his game time on Tracer, even though I think that's his best hero. He spent most of his time matching Roadhog, and he's a good Roadhog too, but he spent most of his time matching Roadhog with Evermore, which really didn't work for them. So I think that LW Blue has a big advantage, because if they just follow the same game plan that Meta Athena laid out for them, and they just constantly harass Evermore and make it so that he can't use his smart positioning and his Roadhog play to carry the game, then I think they win easily. So I think that Athena did a huge favor to LW Blue by showing them how to beat Kongdu Panthera. And I don't think Kongdu Panthera, because Rascal hasn't been playing at the same level in the playoffs that he did in the regular season, can really overcome the fact that if Evermore is removed from the game, that they're going to have somebody else to step up and fill that carry role, because Rascal really hasn't been that impactful in the playoffs so far.
Okay. In terms of the Meta Athena move, where they obviously got out of the group, I mean, most people would have picked Panthera and LW Blue as the teams that are getting out instead. One of the reasons why people kept counting out Meta Athena every stage is this storyline that oh, yeah, okay, so Hoon carried all those games, but now it's going to stop, finally a team's going to beat him. But hasn't this next round really been about Libero? The fact that can partly play anything, can just go from playing Diva to playing Genji to, it's been all over the place.
Well, especially in the first match versus Africa Blue, Hoon played okay, but a lot of Hoon's ults were not the greatest when he was playing Diva. And Hoon played, or when he played Zarya, and then he played a lot of Diva, and he wasn't that great at playing Diva in that series. So a lot more of the carrying in the Africa Blue series went over to Libero. And I think Libero, I was singing his praises throughout a lot of the season just because of how versatile he was. But I was taking a look at his stats from the second series that they played against Kongdu Panthera, and he played 10 different heroes in that best of 5, and that was a 3-0? So 10 different heroes in 3 maps. And he has a level of versatility that I think can only be matched by a few players like Tavik in terms of his hero pool, because he's playing all different styles. He's playing Diva a lot of the time, but then he'll switch it up and be an amazing Hanzo player. But wait, here he is on Tracer
and stuff. Yeah,
yeah.
Plays everything.
It's actually crazy how many, and Genji.
He even played 7 minutes
Genji
on
player.
May as well.
Yeah, he's nuts in terms of his personal hero pool, and it's not like he's switching to these heroes and not doing anything. He's switching to these heroes and being impactful on all of them, which is part of, one thing that we haven't talked a lot about with Meta Athena is that, and I think you underrate them a little bit in this way, Zebbosai, because some of the stuff that we've seen at the professional level is Libero will switch his hero every time he sees the enemy hero or the enemy team composition change, and he'll just constantly be countering whatever they're trying to do. Like Kongdu Panthera, his swap to Diva at the end, and the fact that he was hidden in the rafters and ate a Zarya ultimate, and then ate attack visor, and then ate the Zarya ultimate, because he knew that he wasn't going to get any ult in time from his previous hero selections. So he just switches over to counter the ults that he knows are going to coming in, and the ults and the heroes that they're bringing onto the field. So they're really smart about counterplay, and they have depth because of Libero to be able to implement that counterplay in a very serious way.
I think a big thing too, whenever we play them, they practice for the upcoming games. So they don't really care what we play. They just play their comps and try to execute it the best. So obviously, whenever we practice them, it's gonna look better for us, I guess, since they won't be adapting to us. They will be thinking about Envious, for example, or Like maybe that way, but I really do think Runaway. I mean, Lunatic-Hai should be winning that game.
Okay. And what do you actually think? Because obviously Group A was already decided anyway. Did you actually know? I mean, admittedly they had a lot of roster changes, but was it apparent that Runaway was as good as they ended up being? Were they a surprise to you?
Yeah, they were a big surprise to me. I didn't think they'd get this far. No way. I thought they were going to lose in Group A. I didn't see them coming out at all.
What do you think's allowed them to be so good?
Well, like a big thing, like I looked a lot. I probably watched more Apex Season 1 than I did Apex Season 2. And like a big thing is that they have a more versatile roster now. Like Haxel doesn't have to do everything. And then Stitch is actually really good. And I think actually moving Cox to Ana like helped them a lot. Because, I don't know, he's just really, really strong with the hero.
Sure.
Because if I remember right, he was the Trace before. I'm not totally wrong here, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, he was playing. They were sort of playing weird triple DPS compositions.
Yeah.
And so yeah, he was more of the flex player on the team, but they ran a lot of triple DPS, and yeah, Cox has gotten to be quite a good Ana pretty quickly, but he was showing a pretty big hero pool at the time before they made that specific role swap too.
But they just did that for the Fnatic game, right? Because before that, Cox was playing DPS.
Yeah, he was playing flex. Yeah, but yes, he was not playing. He was not playing at the time on the Ana, and they took their Ana player out and then added him, and they brought Bumper back in too, which was as the more off tank player because he played in the qualifiers for them as an off tank, and then he just sat out the first two matches. Did you have a chance to ever scrim against them after they lost to Kongdu Panthera and they made the roster changes?
No, we never scrimmed them when they did their like changes. But I think it helps too that Cox has experience playing both flex and DPS because he knows what they want, like as an Ana. He knows what kind of supports they need. And I think that's a big key for any Ana player.
Do you think that Runaway can actually beat whoever they play, LW Blue or Panthera?
I think like for them, Panthera is probably the easier opponent. But they can probably beat both teams, but then like you never know. Like if LV Blue turns up the way they should, I think they should win the tournament.
Okay, Monty, what do you think? Who do you have winning that one?
I think LW Blue. I don't know if I want to double down on them at this point in time, Thorin. Like, that's the thing, is that I went so ham on them previously.
So, wait a minute. You don't want to double down now when, in theory, it's the last chance to actually be really right and not just say the obvious thing once they've already won the games. Well, I mean, if you don't want to buy the stock at its lowest, Monty, even though you think it's going to end up at the highest, I don't know what to tell you, mate. This is the last chance to get your ticket right.
Yeah, but the stock might also crater into
it could,
no
absolutely,
value.
Absolutely.
And that's the thing, is that I really think that at their best, LW Blue is the best team in this tournament, but their inconsistency has been worrying, and they do seem to tilt or whatever. Like, their inexplicable breakdowns that they have, it's not something that I'm necessarily confident that they can fix quickly, because usually that's a symptom of a very like deeper team issue, whether it's interpersonal or just they don't have enough people who talk or are active shot callers on the team. So that makes me concerned. But I'll go with LW Blue. I actually don't believe all the Runaway hype.
Wouldn't LW Blue just be a really tough team in as much as they've got the much better DPS players?
I do think they have better DPS players, yes. And
I think the biggest thing is that Runaway looks a lot better whenever they play a tank team rather than more divey DPS team. And LV Blue can play both styles, but I think they're the best whenever they play like 2-2-2.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's probably a reasonable point to make, and I don't know. I just don't see that Runaway is going to have that same level of coordination as LW Blue, and I think that Runner is also going to have problems because one thing that LW Blue does really well is select their targets. Like, they're very good at focus firing one person in an instant. And when you have a player like Runner who has some positioning issues, even if he is a great shot caller for the team, sometimes he gets caught out from behind Reinhardt shields or is in silly places on the map that he shouldn't be as a Lucio. So if you try and play that way against LW Blue, they are one of the most punishing teams when it comes to mistakes in enemy positioning. So I think that that's a pretty good advantage for them. If runner happens to be caught out a lot, then you're going to see a lot of 6v5 scenarios that LW Blue should be able to win pretty handily. So I like that aspect about the matchup as well.
Okay. So since the good thing about Apex is it all just stays on the same patch and you really get to see week by week what people change as the teams play.
Except now, when it's going to patch, it's going to change.
Yeah, true. But do you think that so far, like, have we actually explored the limits of this patch? Would there have been many more meta shifts, do you think, if we had stayed for another month and a half or something? Do you think people figured it out by now?
No, I don't. And the reason why I say that is I think that Sombra is still very strong on this patch, but is underutilized. And I feel that way about Sombra in general, which is why I'm worried that some of her PTR buffs will go through, because I think she is not only a high skill capped hero individually, but she's a very high skill capped hero as a team when you integrate it into team play. And because she plays so differently and you have to make certain sacrifices for DPS in return for utility when you play Sombra, or tankiness, right? Obviously, you're going to have to take away something to use her mostly utility-based kit. So I think we saw some of that with Kong du Panthera and Rascal's amazing Sombra play, but that was against Flashlux and not one of the better teams. We've seen it as sometimes a pocket defense pick on maps like Anubis. We've seen it, of course, with Meta Athena doing that attack on Hanamura. So she's starting to slowly get more use, but I really don't think we've seen as much Sombra as we could, because I think she's very strong, but she fundamentally changes how many teams play. So unless you're quite practiced with her, it doesn't make a lot of sense to try and pick her up, because so much about how you engage as a team changes when you have the Sombra.
What do you think, Zebbosai, of where Sombra is now and where she'll be when the buffs come in?
Well, I don't know. Like, as Monte says, she is a very hard hero to play as a team, because you pretty much rely on that one ult. Apart from the ult, she can't really get a lot done. Like, sure, she can get the hack now and then, but I don't think we've played enough with Sombra. We do pick her sometimes, like on defense, on Anubis, etc., but I don't know where she's at.
Did the Koreans actually pick it in scrims much?
Yeah, that's why we started doing it. We just copied them, like LW Blue, because they did play some Sombra on certain maps. Yeah. We did pick her up and try her there, but we haven't really experimented on our own with her.
What do you think of the notion of, how, obviously you don't have any say in this, it'll be Blizzard who does it, but what would you think about the idea of having patches last longer? Like a patch lasts 3 months a span or something like this. So there's more time for people to figure things out, and then a counter to that. Because I know from every other game I've ever followed where it was relatively quick patches, every single time people were like, right, this patch is totally figured out. These are all the OP things, and this is all the meta. Say the next patch changes 2 weeks later, 4 days before the patch change, someone's like, oh wait, actually that wasn't so OP. Here's the thing that totally counters it, and now no one ever plays the meta champ. That sort of thing happened again and again. And the most ridiculous example going the other way is obviously StarCraft Brood War, where 7 years into the game, people could find a unit that no one used, and then just that'd be the best thing to do. So what's
7 years after they stopped patching.
Yeah, absolutely. So what's your sense for how does it stifle or even help the metagame if you patch so soon? What's your take on it?
I definitely think they should keep the patches running longer. 3 months sounds pretty good, because right now we started practicing on PTR to get used to Ana being nerfed. We have Orisa, and then now they announced they're also going to change Lucio. We can't even practice on PTR now because Lucio is so broken. There's no way they let that through into the game. So I don't know, it's too much at once. Because we're trying to figure out Orisa, how we can use her well, and then the Ana nerf, obviously. And then we also have the lost meta, the triple tank or triple DPS. We're still figuring out when they're just adding more changes all the time.
That's also, unfortunately, what will always wreck every single competitive game that has a really big casual base is that there's no patch that's like, this patch is one hero being changed by 2%. Every patch change is like, here's something for you and you and you and this guy over here. And like, what about me? Oh, yeah, you get something as well. And it's like, here are 10 variables which have more combinations than all the atoms in the universe. Have fun. And if you're in the casual game, okay, that's fun. You know, they updated a bunch of shit. But if you're in the competitive game, you're like, have they just killed my entire team? Is my team good now? Like, who the fuck knows, right?
Yeah, I think actually the patch where Ana is nerfed and Orisa is getting released, and it's also the Sombra changes there, I guess. We haven't experimented a lot with the Sombra, so I don't know if she's actually overpowered.
And here's the other thing, is you don't even know, none of us know, if all of those changes are going to go through. History says for the PTR they probably are, but you never know.
So much with Lucio, like, because I feel there's no point to practice on the PTR because the game is just so different there now. So we have to play live, but we also have a tournament in like a week where we're probably going to use Orisa, and we can't practice with her now because they just fucked up Lucio.
So let's talk about Orisa and how do you think Orisa is going to be used by the professional players? Because Blizzard loves to say, hey, this is going to be an anchor tank, right? They wanted something that can take some of the burden off of Reinhardt or serve a similar role, but I don't really see her playing that role. So what is your take on Orisa as a hero? Because I do think she's really strong. I just don't know if she's actually going to replace Reinhardt in a lot of compositions. In fact, I think it's more likely that she's used with Reinhardt in a lot of these compositions.
Yeah, like I don't want to get into her too deep because we're actually like playing with her a lot and we have some comps we want to run with her. But she doesn't replace Reinhardt whatsoever. Like, she does replace Zarya more. Like, Reinhardt is still going to be there.
Yeah, that was sort of my assumption on how she was going to actually end up working. I mean, maybe at a casual level she can replace Reinhardt, but it's difficult at a competitive level to replace the amount of utility that Reinhardt brings you and the amount of safety when you have a bunch of pro players who can hit headshots 9 times out of 10. That barrier becomes very valuable.
Yeah, and like if you play Orisa and then you face a Reinhardt, you're always gonna get run over with like a stun or just him just charging in at you. So it isn't possible to play without a Reinhardt. Like you can't really play Orisa with like a dive comp either. So you need to have a Reinhardt to play Orisa well. At least that's how we feel it right now.
Did you see, Monty, the AMA that Jeff Kaplan actually did where he talked about some of the Blizzard things? So I don't know if anyone saw this, but someone basically asked them about like what their philosophy on like the on-balance changes are. And they actually actively said that everyone tells them, you just watch like Diamond and above players. And they were like, do you realize how small an amount of people that would be to make a decision based on? So as a result, they're almost saying, Monty, that they don't just look for like how strong something is based on the top players. They just look at actual scrubs and they're like, this seems to be way too overpowered. Get the fucking banner out. So that scares me, Monty, when people say shit like that.
So I guess what's interesting to me is that maybe when Overwatch gets more heroes, because from what I've seen in terms of statistics, the biggest hero that changes between different skill tiers on the ladder is Junkrat. Like, Junkrat is played like an insane amount in Bronze and Silver, and then never in Masters and above, basically. So, but in League of Legends, when you have over 125 different champions in the game, Riot has pretty much just decided that some of these heroes or some of these champions are going to be low skill tier champions that maybe take over solo queue at lower levels. And maybe Master Yi has a great win rate in Silver in League of Legends, but they're not going to buff him because it would destroy the lower levels of the game. And they're not going to nerf him because otherwise nobody would use him at all, right? So you end up with sort of a stratification of
You think this will happen
champions.
in Overwatch?
I mean, it already is with Junkrat as it is right now. But I think that it's essential that it does happen to some degree, because otherwise, I mean, for example, right now, I was reading that Ryze in solo queue has something like a 47% win rate.
It's low. I think it's low. I think it was 37%.
Oh, really?
Even though obviously
that's crazy.
It bodies people in competitive. Yeah.
Like in the professional scene, like he's one of the top picks.
That is also because people in solo queue are so cretinous at the low level. They don't understand the concept of roaming as well. So like they can't use that champion in any way, right?
Sure. But the point is that I think that you are going to see eventually, as they add more heroes to the game, this stratification, and hopefully they'll start really balancing that way, because obviously you can't. It's difficult to balance around the lower levels because it will absolutely ruin your esport. If you try and get all heroes to a 50% win rate in silver, your esport is destroyed, because a lot of these heroes are going to be vastly more powerful in the hands of a professional player who's super good on them, right? So if you the reason why is if you take a very high, like a hero with a very high skill floor and a very high skill ceiling, like Sombra, for example, where you really have to be good at her to be able to even use her to achieve a 50% win rate. When you have a hero with a huge skill ceiling and a pro player is able to max that out, but maybe the average. So let me put it a different way. So there's a hero where an average player can play that hero at a 50% level, and a pro player can play it at 100% level. But then if you have the higher skill floor or higher skill ceiling, what you're going to get is an average player can play it at a 20% level, but a pro player can play it at 100% level. So the difference in win rates between the tiers on those two different heroes is going to be massive, because of the difficulty of playing the hero and the fact that it can only really be approached by a very high skill player. So if you try and balance it for all 50% with heroes with different skill floors and ceilings, then you end up with a fucking crazy professional scene, and you can't do that. So I think that they, like, other developers have, sometimes you just never see champions or heroes in the professional scene because they're too shit, but they're brain dead, and you can spam them at a lower level, and you just have to accept that as a balanced designer.
Yeah. What do you think about this Zebbosai? Like the general philosophy they seem to take?
I don't know. Like, I see where they're coming from. They gotta, like, it's good if the game is popular, obviously.
Yeah, for sure.
And if they can make heroes more fun for the lower ranks to play, like, I guess that's fine. They gotta find some balance, I guess, because they can't just be looking at the esports part of it, and they can't just be looking at, or like right now they're like looking at the different skill tiers, and that doesn't really work. They probably gotta cater more towards esports.
Plus, the big thing I've seen as obviously like an absolute rank amateur is the big flaw from, because obviously MOBA's like my reference point on this, because it's another game where they tend to balance based on the average player, not the pro player. Just like in MOBA, the big flaw I see in Overwatch balance is that the champions or heroes in Overwatch, obviously, that have the least impact at the lower levels are ones that are based on like utility, like understanding how to play with a teammate. Whereas if you just have something that's fairly self-sufficient and is just about, do you have like a basic level and can you kill people, those heroes will always do fine. So the problem is, every time you buff the utility hero to let an idiot be able to use it, you now make someone who's really good fucking OP with whatever that is. And then hence, in Overwatch, it's even worse because you've got less heroes. So you end up with like two things must be used every game, you know?
And that'll change in time, right? I hope that we are able to... So let's talk about what Overwatch needs to get away from that, because I think that's a very interesting topic of conversation. I know a lot of people probably want to see more DPS heroes, but for me, I just want there to be like 3 more supports and 3 more tanks in the game, because it's the utility that really needs to change, because it's the utility heroes that you're constantly seeing the same in the professional scene. It's always, you know, you pretty much, not always, but you often have a Reinhardt. You basically always have an Ana and a Lucio, right? That's fucking terrible. First off, I think Lucio's design is just awful. I don't know why Blizzard even designed him that way, because in any MOBA or FPS, move speed is the most broken stat you can have. It is incredibly valuable. And to have Lucio give a team-wide speed boost is like, this is a company that made Heroes of the Storm. They should know this about MOBAs, that you can't just speed everybody up and not have it be used in every single situation possible. So, at a professional level at least. So I really don't even understand fundamentally why Lucio was designed that way, or how he even got out of like the designer's brains.
So Monty, I mean, the problem with that is, again, from Jeff Kaplan's AMA, I've got to just update you that you're actually wrong, because here's what Jeff Kaplan said about Lucio. I know you live in your little bubble of these pro players, as you call them, you know, but they're just a minority, Monty, and society's about catering to the needs of the many, not the few. So here's what Lucio's really about. Okay, so listen up, Zebbosai. So what he says, right now, we're trying some stuff with Lucio. We feel like a lot of players feel like he's a must-have in comps, but also doesn't feel super impactful to play. We're trying some ideas to make him more... This is what's great. To make him more engaging to play. Very interesting term there, more engaging. Who knows what the fuck that means? So more engaging to play while making him a little less obvious / must pick. Right? I don't know how you even balance that sentence. Never mind that as a concept. So he's going to make him more engaging to play, but less of a must pick. So if you can get your brain around that, what do you think of that? Please, someone.
But the thing is, they just ended up, like, at least if you look at the PTR, he's just massively buffed. Like, sure, in some regards, he's nerfed. But then now, like, his heal does 50% more. He can boop a target to the moon. And he is super fast on walls. Like
that is definitely impactful. Then he's fit
he
that part of the bill. Yeah,
I understand what Jeff Kaplan's trying to say because Lucio is fucking boring. Because also here's another thing that is really boring that you shouldn't make in MOBAs or in FPS games. Aura heroes. Shit, those suck to play.
Yep.
Like Soda was so fucking boring in League of Legends. And so you make a speed aura hero. Like who does that? It's terrible. It's just like a terrible concept that is destined to be broken and a must pick in a professional scene. So I'm glad they're making Lucio changes. Don't get me wrong. Like he is like one of the worst parts of Overwatch. A lot of people have suggested coming up with just increasing the speed of the game in general across the board and then entirely reworking Lucio so it doesn't have a speed boost anymore. So the game is played at the same speed that it is now, but you don't have to have that Lucio to provide it, which is interesting. But Blizzard has shown that they are very good, I think, at making smart changes to the game. And at least for me, one of the things that has been encouraging has been that I feel like every hero that they've made since release, like Ana and Sombra and now Orisa, are all well-designed and high-skill heroes. Like they're all really hard to play and really offer a lot of unique stuff. And then I look at heroes like Lucio and I'm like, Lucio must be like a really early design process hero where they hadn't really figured out exactly how it was going to be played yet. But ever since that they've gotten the statistics on how the game is played and watched the professional scene, I think the heroes they've released are good. And people will complain about Ana because she's really powerful, but I think Ana's kit is actually really interesting and she's fucking hard to play well. So even though, you need to make some changes to balance, it's not like Lucio that just offers way too much. And I agree that with what Jeff is saying, you need to make him so that he's actually fun to play and not like a wall riding aura bot. And I think that's what he's trying to go with here is to say we need to make this more interactive, which is they did that with Sombra with Symmetra. They were successful. Like Symmetra, I thought her shielding, where you just basically put shields on everybody at the beginning of the game and just stand there, was fucking terrible design. And then they replaced it with the projectile barrier, like the that's Zarya's ability. Whatever her like wall is, and that was much more interesting. And you could use it skillfully. There was no way to skillfully like put shields on people. It was awful to watch and to play.
Okay, I've got an idea for a hero design, so hear me out on this. Okay, the hero is called AVG, not AWG. There's AVG, okay, and it's obviously short for average, right? And this hero represents the average player in Overwatch, right? And what happens is the ultimate of the hero is for 10 seconds you become Jeff Kaplan. And so what happens is when you become Jeff Kaplan, you can only do it for 10 seconds, all the heroes in the game feel the way they are perceived by him. So Ana is perfectly fine where she is right now. Sombra's quite weak actually. Lucio's not impactful at all. And Winston is never played. So it only will last for 10 seconds though, and you just get to see because it's sort of an aura effect. If they come within his aura, that's what happens to them. They just become weaker in all those ways. And I'd just like to see what the impact would be on the game because I think this has got legs, Monty. I think it's got to be tried out at least.
I mean, I do get where Jeff is coming from, and they have access to a vast array of statistics that we don't get to see. So I think it's silly to discredit them in that way because they just have more information to work from than we do. And they have access, I think, to the professional statistics in a way that nobody really does either, which hopefully will change because I would like access to some of those statistics. It helps me a lot in my job. But
I've got a question for both of you, so I'll start with you, Zebbosai. If you could actually pick a support hero that isn't currently in the meta, isn't currently used, or isn't good enough at the moment, which one would you like to see come in if you could?
Like one of the 5 we have, the buff one, or what?
Yeah, just pick one that you'd like to be more relevant.
I don't know. I think Mercy's terrible. I don't like the way the hero works. I don't want to see her. And then Symmetra, I don't really care for her. Like I think Anna and Lucio are like they impact the game in a more fun way. They make it so that you can like do a lot more stuff within the game. Like without a Lucio, the game would be so stale.
So we actually just need some new support.
So you
invented them, yeah?
You like the Lucio? See, I don't like.
No, I like what he provides to the game. I don't like that he doesn't require much. Like if you look at a Lucio player, you look how well can he call. You don't look at how well he can play the hero because that doesn't really matter. And like that's what's good on the PTR because it will matter what a Lucio can do. But then it's shit for the game in general.
Why do you say it's shit for the game in general? Because you like the speed boost because it allows you to get through choke points, or what?
The thing is, like, when I look at it, you'll just play Death Ball because it heals 50% more. Imagine that with an Anonade. You just go back to quad tanks, and then like you can't really risk using speed because then you don't have the ability to then like heal up, you know, because like the heal is gonna be so strong. So like using speed would probably just lose you fight straight up if you speed in someone that then heal boost. Like the heal boost will be so big. I just find it. I don't know. I don't see how it can ever work in a fun way.
I see what you're saying because basically you're saying that everybody's going to be clustered up because his aura size has been reduced, but his healing has been increased. So basically all you have to do is throw a biotic grenade in the middle of that, spam the amp it up heal boost, and it heals all your quad tank up as they just walk around as a giant death ball. That sounds pretty terrible.
Death ball, yeah.
Okay, well hopefully that won't happen. I do think that they're going to make a lot of changes to the Lucio that's on the PTR right now because it's so drastic, and they're going to get that information and rework it. I don't think that Lucio is going live anytime soon, so or ever.
I hope you're right.
Okay. What do you actually think of the rate at which they're bringing out heroes? Are they doing it quick enough, Monty?
I'd like to see it be a little bit faster for now. I remember.
Do you remember when at the beginning of League of Legends, Riot claimed
I was
do
about
like
to say.
one every month or something? Like,
no,
and
they did it every 2 or 3 weeks. Dude.
No, but they claimed they were going to keep doing that as well. They just lied completely.
Well, thank God. They did slow it down, but I remember in like 2011 and 2012 when not 2012, they did mostly slow it down by then, but like 2010 and 2011. Yeah. They were literally at times releasing a hero or a champion every 2 to 3 weeks. And it was a fucking mess. Like, let me tell you, they had this, people remember release Xin Zhao and release LeBlanc and all of these champions that they weren't even balanced properly because, of course, how could you even test them when you have that small amount of time to release every new champion coming into the game? And a lot of those champions ended up having to be reworked or in a terrible state of balance right now, and nobody ever plays them. So, no, I don't want that to happen. Okay. I think that Blizzard is being deliberate with the amount of heroes that they're releasing, but I do think that there is you can strike a balance between what Riot was doing and what Blizzard's doing right now, because the more tools you have in the game at the moment, the better state the game is going to be in the long run. And maybe I'm impatient, but I don't really want to wait for. I think that Overwatch is going to be great as an esport in a year to 2 years down the line when we have some new game modes to replace some of the ones that are problematic right now, or the assault maps are fixed. And we have, again, going back to it, I just really think you need more tanks and supports. Because as soon as you have more tanks and supports, then you have much more utility, and it becomes much more fun to watch. Because I was thinking about this the other day, and I didn't talk about this in my vlog on the viewability, and I think that one of the main issues with Overwatch is it's spectacular to watch a DPS player, a good McCree player, a good soldier player
in
first-person shooting, right?
Yeah.
But and that can be fun to switch to. But I realized when I was thinking about it that the more CC and utility abilities you have, the easier it is to watch the game in third person instead. Okay. And you can have like a helicopter cam, and when you see big crowd control effects, so it's more like watching a MOBA in that case and less like watching an FPS, that the more utility you have, the more fun it is to watch team fights from the bird's eye perspective, from the helicopter cam, and think about things tactically. Whereas the more like an FPS it is cool to see somebody like IDDQD hit 10 headshots in a row, but it's harder to observe that and really appreciate it as a team game in that regard. So that's another.
It's also a problem if there's 3 people on his team playing DPS.
Yeah,
like that's the difficult. I mean, how do you know which one to fucking spectate?
Right, and then when you don't have that, when it is Ana, Lucio, Reinhardt, or Zarya's played a lot too. When you don't have that same diversity in tanks, like the meta becomes more stale, because we see almost all of the DPS heroes used as it is, right? That's not really a problem. Like DPS diversity is not an issue because you're never building a team composition around your DPS or like you could do a DPS like dive composition with a tracer, and you protect the tracer in a similar way to how you protect a Genji on a dive composition, right? With Zarya bubbles, jumping in with the Winston alongside them. So I think that there's just, you need more utility to provide better support towards the DPS players so that you can support them in many different ways, as opposed to just, speed boosting them and shooting them with Ana darts. So I don't know. That's my feeling. So I know a lot of players casual players are not going to be too enthused if Blizzard doesn't release another DPS hero, because even Sombra, which was categorized as a DPS hero, is not. She's like she's sort of a support. So I just want to see more and more tanks and supports and high utility picks. Okay. And thankfully that's what we've gotten out of them so far.
What do you think, Zebbosai?
No, I agree with him. Like, what the game needs is more tanks and supports, but it's so hard to ever replace a hero like a Reinhardt or a Lucio because they're so unique in what they can bring. I don't really know how they're ever gonna figure that out. Like, they gotta massively nerf them to the point where they can't be used to ever like go away from them, I feel.
I don't think so. I think if you have another 3 to 4 tanks and supports each in the game, then people are gonna try other things, and they're going to have a certain team composition and versatility, because you don't have to have Reinhardt now. I mean, we see so much Winston play with the dive compositions.
That's the thing, though. Then you gotta play dive. Like, there's no way to play like a slower paced game without a Reinhardt. Like, you need a Reinhardt.
True. By the way, Monty,
they're trying to do that with Orisa. So
ironically, Jeff Kaplan did say Winston is the least picked character in the whole game. By the way.
Which is funny because he's actually picked quite a bit at the professional level, right? But I understand why Winston is the least picked character in the casual scene, because
you can't just be a scrub.
No, you can't. And people are like, oh, well, he doesn't have to aim. The problem with Winston at a casual level is if you do not have supports that are healing you, you just instantly die. Like, you do not have time for your jump to get off cooldown before you are dead. If you jump in, and even if you're doing exactly the right thing and trying to disrupt the back line, your teammates are very important to how you play Winston, and you can't really be self-sufficient like you can on a Roadhog in a casual game. So I get why people don't play it. Also, his hitbox used to be the size of the sun, so it was really easy for him to die, even to people with bad aim.
Yeah. What do you think, Zebbosai?
Well, I don't know. With the Winston thing, he just isn't a very fun character to play for the casuals. Like, you'd much rather play like a McCree, shoot ahead, than Genji with a blade and stuff. So he isn't that fun to play.
It's also true, even the character design, like, why would you want to play an ape when you could play a fucking ninja or a guy that has a gun?
A cowboy,
just even thematically, it doesn't make a lot of sense, Monty. Like, you got to at least make him actually like King Kong or something, like massive, Go the other way. Make his hitbox massive, but he has 20,000 health or something. My other right. Exactly, yeah. You just have to kill him, like, it takes 10 minutes.
He basically becomes a raid boss during his ult, so.
It's true, he does. Okay. You know, by the way, Monty, anytime anyone brings up the early days of League of Legends, which obviously that's the great thing about Riot, right? Is that
Dude,
now that the game...
I can't even fucking handle it because so many of the people who talk about LoL were never even fucking there.
Nope, this is
they
what's
don't even
good.
understand that it took 3 fucking years for LoL to even start being like resembling an esport, right? It was released in 2009, 2.5 years, let's say, to be technically correct. And it wasn't until basically the middle of 2012 that it actually had any kind of spectator mode that was worth looking at and was in a state of balance that wasn't like complete insanity. It took years. Took years to get there. And people now love to talk about the development of the game, but I was I was playing LoL since beta, and I remember how few people there were at that time. So most of the people who play now were never even around for any of that. They don't even remember a time before LCS existed.
Well, plus, what I love, is that they talk now, even the people who made League of Legends and were in Riot, they talk as though, like, we have this really polished game. And so my favorite example, when you were talking about Release Zen Zhao, which, by the way, shout out to that as probably the worst design champion in the history of any fucking game ever. Like, so stupid on every level. Like, abilities that should be ults, But, whenever... Okay, do you remember when that guy, he's called Januk, who worked for Riot, he made this classic tweet.
He works for Immortal.
It should be a meme forever, because he was dissing Dota 2, right? And he said something along the lines of, like, Dota 2 ignores everything we've learned over 13 years of MOBA games, which, first of all, I don't know what fucking MOBA games have been out 13 years, bro. I guess he was playing, like, Dota before it even was an idea in someone's brain in Warcraft 2, apparently. Like, I don't know what game he was talking about in 2000 or whatever, but ignore that part. He actually thinks that, like when he says, like, lessons we've learned about MOBA. Okay, when you're a child, Monty, not everyone has to put their hand into fire to know that you get burned by fire. Because we all know that someone has gotten burned by fire. So the rest of us learn by their example, right? Basically, if he thinks that they've learned all those lessons in 13 years, that's like he's actually a man just covered from head to toe with burns who just sat in a fire when he was like a kid. And that's him like, well, I learned that lesson, didn't I? So listen to me. I've learned all the lessons. Like, I don't know how much you really learned, Riot. I mean, all I ever say to people, Monty, whenever they talk about Riot balance, I say the majority of the super OP hard carry champs in League were only nerfed, never buffed. Like, think about stuff like LeBlanc, Zed. They were just nerf. And LeBlanc was just like now, but with a silence. Like, they literally nerfed them all, and they're still super viable and hard carry champ. Like, how fucked were these on release?
To be fair, they did. LeBlanc was fucked on release. To be fair, though, they did actually rework LeBlanc, sort of.
Sure.
But not to the degree where it wasn't a hard carry. I mean, my favorite one is Rise, that they've reworked like 4 times.
Oh, it's going to have to be done again, mate. It's going to have to be done again.
It is going to have to be done again.
Not only that, Monty, it has no fucking body picking it and being able to play it on solo queue, and it has a point-and-click route. Like, what more can I do at this point? I have to make it OP, don't I, for these scrubs to win? It's not even a skill shot. You just make the person have to stand still. That should be the end of all team fights right there. You walk in and fight, route the person you need to kill. The end of the game, right? 37% pick rate, or win rate. No, win rate, yeah. People are picking it. They're not winning with it. Fucking hell. Anyway, so the point we're making here is Monty is subtly, not in any way subtly, backdoored.
Also, to be fair to Januk, he was not a game designer at Riot.
Okay.
So
still a hilarious
that wasn't his
line.
job. It is
to
funny,
me, he's Mr. Riot. So what Monty did there, not very subtly, is because Overwatch is still, it's got growing pains in terms of the balance design. He's backdoored us into a discussion of, but Riot are pretty shit at balance design, which I agree with. Yes, you're right. And so it's not as bad as that right now. That's all we're saying. It's not as bad as that.
I just think that it's not about Riot or Blizzard. I think that with any developer who's making a new game in a genre, because remember, Blizzard's never made an FPS before, and let's be real, I wasn't too thrilled with their attempt at making a MOBA. So the combination of the two, I think, is something that certainly their designers have a lot of experience playing in similar styles of games and did their research, and the game is very fun to play, and I think, at least in the current patch, relatively balanced. But I do think that with any title, you're going to have those growing pains where you simply don't have the necessary experience or ability to even understand your own game. Because as weird as that sounds, these things develop very organically, and sometimes things that seemed like good ideas early on, when you actually put all the parts together, don't end up as good ideas any longer and have to be changed. And I think that goes with any competitive title.
Zebbosai, since you came from Team Fortress 2, and in that game, obviously, you have the like vaguely similar roles, but you don't have all the heroes. So as when we had Sideshow on, he basically said that like because people have been playing Team Fortress 2 for so long, it's basically people, you know, you can get better at a role, but eventually people would spam in other roles just to have something to do, you know, so something to improve on. Do you actually want to live in a world with Overwatch where there are like 120 heroes to pick from and you have to practice all these different ones? Do you kind of like it at the moment where people can still specialize? What's your take on it?
The thing is, yeah, I come from TF2, so I've never experienced this, but like I'd love more heroes. I don't know if I want 100 heroes, but
I don't want that many.
If you can get, say, like 50, 60 heroes, maybe, I think that'd be pretty good. So you can still specialize around roles, but then, like, 50, 60 heroes. I think that amount should probably be pretty good for the game.
The problem is, Monty, this is probably the most difficult thing to do, because no one, for all the great minds that we have on esports who analyze the game, and as in like literally the matches and the way the game works itself, I've never actually heard anyone come up with a really good explanation as to how the fuck Dota 2 actually managed the insane balance they have, where the key to Dota 2 is not only is almost every hero viable, but on top of that, part of what makes it viable is you can use most of them in all the different roles. That's the craziest part of it. Whereas the key thing about the League of Legends one is if you're worried coming from another game and you've never played League of Legends, it's not really like because there's 120, you know, you play them all and you have to know them. No, at any one time, their game is so broken in like sort of a bad... Here's the thing. Dota gets broken in a good way where it's like everything's broken to a degree and it's how you use it. League gets broken in a way where it's like these few things are so broken right now, just don't worry about the rest for now until someone figures out how to make them broken. So League actually in a mad way gets way more limited in terms of what you can use, where you can use it and how you can use it. So the problem is no one's really figured out what Dota managed there, so it's hard to know anyone can go down that path really. I feel like at the moment Overwatch would head more towards the League model where certain things like you have to have an Ana every time. It's like certain stuff would be so broken you'd have to use it.
Well, I don't know very much about Dota, so this is coming from a place of partial ignorance. But I think that the big difference there was the fact that itemization is so different between the two games. Because in Dota,
yes, that does help.
All the item actives that you have allow you to overcome for certain heroes' shortcomings, right? Like if you need more mobility, you can buy a Blink Dagger, you can buy a BKB to eliminate crowd control, which means that any given hero you can play in a large variety of different situations because you can specifically give yourself more abilities to counter other heroes, even
it
if
also makes the build
kit
path
of that hero itself is
as a result. It makes also
ideal.
It makes the build path essentially part of like reading the game.
Yes.
Whereas that's actually one of the biggest flaws of League of Legends. That once you get on half a build path, you're not just abandoning it and going for some other shit because you can't really know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. You know.
Yeah, and the problem with LoL that I've always had is not enough item actives, and basically items are stat sticks, right? They just give you statistics, which is really fucking boring in my mind.
Monty, did you ever see... I have to ask you this. Sorry. I realize this is another digression about LoL, but this is the last one, okay? Did you ever see that thing where... I think it was the fucking Deathfire Grasp, where they said something. This, when you hear this, it'll make you just think like everyone who plays League of Legends, delete yourself from life.
Yes. Yeah,
where
I know
where
exactly
something like 95% of people never activated the Deathfire
That was on my
Grasp.
Twitter. Don't you remember that? Because I was like arguing about why.
But
they
when you
should
hear that,
remove
you're just like,
Deathfire
why
Grasp. And
are we even
somebody on the
having a
design
debate? It's
team
over, right?
Tweeted at me and was like, "Did you know that 95% of players don't use the active on DFG?" I was just like, but I can't argue with that. That you should remove it from the game.
Yeah.
I was just like, well, you can't balance that item. So if people aren't going to use it, so yeah, I actually agree with you.
Like that stat just actually like it just you lose hope when you hear that, don't you? It's like
So yeah, I think that was one of the problems with LoL, and it's unfortunately those issues can't really be changed with Counter-Strike. But I think, like, I really think that when we look at Counter-Strike in the future, or not Counter-Strike, Overwatch in the future, and we look at where the title is going. I don't think we need to go to what Zebbosai was saying. I don't think we need 50 or 60 heroes. Like, that'd be great. But I think that this game starts getting super awesome starting around Hero 35.
Okay.
And this is maybe a year or two in the future where there are going to be new game modes that they've worked out that I think with all the data they have, they're going to be able to create new game modes that are a lot better than the ones we have currently. And I think with that level of hero diversity and the amount of new game modes and new game types, I think a lot of the kinks will be worked out by that time. And I think that's where it's really going to like hit its stride as an esport, because it's still definitely suffering from some growing pains right now.
Okay, Zebbosai, here's the interesting thing about Overwatch that it has over all the famous MOBAs, is that it's not just trying to have different heroes, it's got different maps and even different objective map types. So that's another area that I'm always interested to find out what people think of that. Do you like having so many different types? And would you like there to be more maps? Would you like there to be just like a couple of the types get chosen and then you build more maps around those? What path would you take if it was up to you?
I'm fine with having, like, as it is now, 3 different game modes, as long as there's like a map veto. Because, like, as it was a DreamHack,
Okay.
you know, you'd get ban, pick. So you can't eliminate all 3 King of Steel maps as well back then. So, like, if a team was really good at that specific map type, they could play it, but they can't only play that. So, like, I'm fine with the amount of game modes we have now, but I don't want there to be more. Because, like, at the moment, we already have 14 maps. Oasis, for example, runs.
Okay, so let's change the conversation. So you don't want more game modes in competitive. What if they were to create a new game mode and phase out a different game mode?
Yeah, I'm fine with that. As long as there's not more than 3. I think 3 is...
Okay.
Technically,
like,
there are 4.
already too
Just
much.
saying.
Yeah. Okay, but I just look at it. Payload, get up the hill.
Yeah, understand. Yeah.
So I hear what you're saying, and with the 14 maps, I think that they should move the map pool down to 10, so that you have 2 to 3 maps in any given type of.
I don't think you have to go as a
game
game
mode.
as in Counter-Strike with like 6 or 7 maps. Like, you can have at least 10 maps.
Well,
here.
you
Fine.
can't go to 6 or 7 maps because there are 4 game modes. So at that point, you'd only have 1 of certain game mode types, which obviously is not okay. So you have to have, I think you have to have 10 at least, but 14 is too many. So I really believe, though, that what Blizzard will do in the future is that they will set a pool of maps, probably, obviously less than the total number of maps that they have right now for a competitive season, because 14 is too many. And that, I think that's just going to come in the future. So I wouldn't worry too. I think that problem's going to be fixed pretty fast.
Okay, because this ties into here's one thing I've always loved about NA players in esports games, okay, is that one thing that NA, you're probably wondering this, Monty, a lot of esports games, NA isn't the best. They're not really ahead of the meta. They're not innovating a lot of new things. But there's one area, Monty, where I can tell you in every esports game, NA players are ahead of the curve. You can never catch these guys at making excuses. Now, they can come up with the most inventive excuses. Like, I'll give you a quick example just before I build into the Overwatch one, okay? In CSGO, they always used to tell us in the early days, oh, you don't understand. There's not enough sponsorship, and therefore you can't have enough top teams, So we got them sponsorship. They've got the sponsorship now. Okay, yeah, well, there's sponsorship, but people haven't had enough time to get to the top of the game. So we gave them a few more years. They got to the top of the game. And then eventually, they got even more money than Europe. And then you know what they said, Monty? They said, there's too much money in the game. Now all of our players are spread apart on all these teams we've got. And I was like, you guys are geniuses, because every time I think I've got you cornered, you've got the perfect counter to me. So likewise, here is the excuse, Monty. It's Ajax, okay? He's just joined NRG, and he's coming out swinging with straight fire excuses. Are you ready? So here's his reason as to why Koreans are a bit overrated, okay? It's that NA teams don't really play 2CP maps. There's pick ban, Monty. So how can, that's, NA's just behind on 2CP. So if they add 2CP, all I'm going to say is...
So I'm just going to put this out there. Okay. Western teams, they were terrible on Assault. They only won 1 Assault map in Apex. Yeah. Guess what? They also only won 1 Control map, which is basically saying Western teams are only good at payload maps. So I don't even know what you do with that, really. Like, it's not just Assault. They also kind of suck at Control. So
what you're saying is we need to only have payload maps. Okay, I mean, I'm with you, Monty. It's a good idea. Okay, so
I mean, the West would be sick if there was only payload maps, right? unfortunately, that's not how it works.
Okay.
The
What do you
thing
think,
ab-
Zebbosai? Is it an okay excuse?
The
But
way,
by the way, congratulations on being the team that actually won control and assault maps against a Korean team.
Thank you. I don't know. Like, I get pretty annoyed whenever casters say that Western teams don't practice 2CP because
I don't say they don't. Hey,
No.
hey, this is nope.
No, you don't.
This was one of your fellow pro players who said this. So
Yes, I
don't lay this one on.
I mean, it was an NRG player, but yeah, he's a pro player.
like, no CP says this on cost all the time. Like, we do practice. Like, I know some teams in Europe, most of the tier teams that you like whenever we ask CP, no, we don't say that.
Wait there a sec. I can't hear you for some
Yeah,
reason. The
you're,
mic's
like,
like
breaking
going in
up.
and out. Why is that? Maybe the wire was a bit loose or something.
Let's see.
Hello?
No?
Yeah, that's better. That's better.
Yeah, well, like some teams in Europe, they don't do that. Like tier 2 teams, they'll just say straight up, say no, we don't play CP.
Okay.
But all the tier 1 teams, they do play CP, and like the thing is, with the old lineup when we had ban, we'd focus on like one CP. Like with the old Misfits, we'd only really play Anubis because we knew we could ban Skaya and Panamura, but we still play them once in a while. Now with the new lineup, like we practice all the game modes, so I don't know. I find it just stupid to not like have that as an excuse. We know these are the maps. We gotta be good at all of them.
Do you think they should change the pick ban, Monty, in OPEX?
I think.
Because here's the
I
thing,
think-
Monty. I know the Westerners like this guy are thinking that'll help us. They don't realize no, the Koreans will use that to fuck you as well. They will take out your maps that you want.
Yeah.
So you'll have no chance.
They'll just play you on assault all day, right?
Exactly. So yeah. What do you think as an actual like abstract, like what's good for the game? What would your say be?
Well, I think what's good for the game is that I like the diversity in game modes. So I want to see that, and I enjoy the fact that it does force you to play all of them. But I do think that, again, it should be limited to 10 maps, which you'll notice that Apex week to week does limit the map pool, but it still changes over the course of the season. It would be nice if, or even for group stage, they had one map pool, and then for quarterfinals, they switched a couple of the maps out and changed it a little bit. So, for example, Hollywood was available in groups, but then they swap it out for Eichenwald, and Kings Row there is the whole time or something like that for the quarterfinals or for the playoffs. So I do like the way that it limits the map pool, and I do like the way that it forces you to play all of the map types. And I think it's up to Blizzard to effectively balance those map types, which clearly they're trying to make changes to in terms of the assault maps in particular. So they're trying things. Don't really know if that solution on PTR is the best one right now. I think that winning by 1% is kind of bullshit. I think I'd maybe rather see it by ticks on the control meter instead of just a flat, like a whole number or an integer, I should say, percentage.
Yeah, gets too random with a percentage. I think ticks are fine.
Ticks are, yeah. So I think they're going the right direction, though. I think that we're slowly seeing them move in the right direction. So that's encouraging because unlike a lot of the pro players and everybody who runs around with their hair fucking on fire shouting, "We must eliminate assault, fuck assault," I'd rather see them try and fix it, personally, than just throw the baby out with the bathwater. Maybe there is a good way to fix it that we just haven't come up with yet. But that said, I think in the long run, probably those maps are going to be phased out. And we know because Blizzard has said publicly that they're working on different kinds of game modes, that it's unlikely that I think people worry because they're thinking, oh no, we have Assault. Assault is going to be in Overwatch forever. I'm going to have to deal with 5 years of Assault maps. I don't think that's true. Like, we haven't seen them make a new Assault map yet. Crucially, I don't think they are going to make another Assault map. I think that they're going to be working on other game types to eventually phase out Assault. So that's more interesting to me.
Like the biggest thing for me is like I guess even with a map veto, we'd still see assault maps because like for example, we know that United is shit on Anubis. Of course, we're gonna try to get to Anubis.
Yeah.
Like we don't care that the map or they bad. Like,
yes, I agree. I think the map picks are fine. In fact, I'm in favor of that. I don't have. Look, I think that the way it was played at like MLG Vegas and DreamHack was terrible. I think the way that OGN has been working has been okay. I think DreamHack is interesting. I wrote an email to the developers and basically about the whole map pool issue. And I said, look, I want to figure out what the best way for tournaments to run map pool drafts are. And everybody was like, they were like, oh yeah, do it the DreamHack way, where you have like you're saying, you have the 2 bans, so you can't eliminate an entire game type. But that is predicated on the fact that there are 14 maps in the pool. If there are fewer maps, then you're not going to have that same level of balance that you have currently. I agree it was a good system for the time, but it's not going to be a good system in a more limited map pool environment unless you do like one ban, but then they're maybe not the same. There may be too many maps up at that point in time. So it's just something to discuss. And I don't think anybody has the right answer for how to have an Overwatch map draft yet. And I'm sure it'll be evolving in time. But I just didn't want anybody, not the pro players, not Blizzard, to react too quickly and codify a map format that was going to have to last for the next 5 years, right? So I think that everybody reacted too quickly, and that I think it's more important to experiment with tournaments using different forms of map drafts, but have something. You can't just have nothing and set maps. That's garbage.
The thing is, like, what I dislike about OGN is if a team is great on COT, sure, they'll get to play COT once. In a map veto system, they probably still only get to play COT once, but they get the advantage that the other team has to remove them so they can play payloads they're slightly better at.
Yeah.
Like now you don't have an advantage being great at COT or Assault because you only ever get to play them once. Like you need to be good at payload the way it is now, or you're never going to win anyway.
That's true. I do. That's a good point. I do disagree. One of the things there are 2 things that I don't like about the OGN format. One of which is that nobody ever gets to pick a control map because it's randomized as the first map. So that's kind of shit. Because maybe you're really good at 3 of the control maps, but you never actually, even if you're a control team that wins almost all of your control maps, if you happen to get the one control map that you're worst at, well, that fucking sucks. You didn't even have a chance to pick it. So I'm not really a big fan of that. And also, I'm not a fan of the fact that if you are really good at payload in any best of 5, or even in the finals in a best of 7, as long as you win payload, you can win a best of 5 or a best of 7, right? And even like it also forces us to watch teams that suck at payload maps play a bunch of payload maps when we could just watch a bunch of awesome control maps instead from teams that are based around. Like if 2 teams are both really good at control and they're all going to pick the control maps, it's more exciting. So I tend to agree more with you, Zebbosai, on this issue, but I'm interested in people forget. I keep saying it. We're in the very early days of Overwatch as an esport. This is a game that's going to be going for years. We know that because of what Blizzard has announced in their commitment with Overwatch League, and at least in Korea, we know that because the game is super fucking popular here, and games that are super fucking popular in Korea tend to go for years and years and years and years. So, I think that we are going to see a lot more experimentation and figuring that out over time.
Thing is, though, that's actually okay. So at the moment, it's very messy. That, as I kind of described there, if you add in stuff like the format and how the pick ban works, there's actually these 3 different factors that will totally decide who has a better chance and who has a worse chance. Like the format of how you pick ban, the number of maps and the control types, and then obviously the different heroes. These 3 factors can all totally radically decide who is the best, down to who might be suddenly 6th if you changed 1 factor. The difference is every other game I am aware of has 1 factor. So in Counter-Strike, in theory, we only have the maps, okay? I mean, they do slightly tweak the guns, but they never make an AK into a water pistol tomorrow. That will never happen, which is the equivalent of what happens to heroes. In League of Legends, it's only the champions that change. I mean, in theory, they change the items a little bit, but not radically, you know? They change them very slowly, actually, the items, but it's mainly just the heroes. So the difference is, at the moment in Overwatch, they just haven't picked which ones to keep the same all the time. And so I actually think this is very interesting going forwards, in as much as if they figure out the right one and then which ones to keep the same, that's where they could actually make the game a lot better, because at the moment it's very messy because they're changing them around. But once you figure out the ones that work and then you fix which to make variable, I think then you'll get like a more stable game, you know.
Sure. It just takes time, right, to figure out what that...
Like, I'll give you a quick example, okay? So this will sound very strange, but as someone who has watched all of Counter-Strike history, there's actually a hilarious what if in Counter-Strike history, right? Which is that everyone who thinks about Counter-Strike never thinks about the rule set that we use in Counter-Strike, which is called max rounds, where you play a maximum of 30 rounds. And the idea is you play until someone gets 16 rounds within regulation, right? Everyone thinks to themselves, that's Counter-Strike. No, someone invented that in like 2001 or so, or 2000. No, that wasn't how the game came out the box.
And CGS changed it, which is actually one of
slightly, yeah.
Well, pretty significantly.
They just made it less, basically. They made it a smaller version. But the key point is, okay, that, believe it or not, in Europe, when Counter-Strike came out, we played a different rule set. It was called Charges Only, and it meant basically you played the same type of game, but it was based on a time limit. And the only rounds you counted were the terrorist rounds one. So when you were on CT side, it's a bit like American football, I guess, in that sense. The defense in general, aside from interception, doesn't score. Your aim is just to make the other guy not score much on his chances, and then your guy gets the chance, and you try to score as much as you can. It was like that. And so, believe it or not, it was a better tactical game, because as a result, you could actually be, 2 rounds from losing, but then you just play amazing defense for 10 minutes, and he never gets it, and you win the game. It actually made the game a lot more varied, and believe it or not, all the Europeans thought this was better.
So when you're saying this, you're basically saying that there was a set amount of time.
You played 10 minutes on each half.
10 minutes in each half, and it's just how many bombs blew up, basically.
No, it's only how many terrorist rounds you won.
Oh, okay, all right.
So here's the key point. Okay. Is
that it's a zero-sum game when it comes to time. So yeah, it is like American.
Yeah,
football.
That's what made it great though. Is that the idea is if you're 1 round behind me and you're on T side now, it's incredibly intense if there's 3 minutes left on the clock, because I have to try and stop you scoring basically for 3 whole minutes. But if I'm a better team, maybe I can do it. Or the other way around. Say there's 3 minutes left and I am 2 rounds down, but I'm an amazing tactical team. Right. Well, it's like American football. Do I go for the one big quick score? Do I set something up that's, it's like you have to make all these crazy reads that you don't make if it's round by round and there's nothing stopping you. Remember, the key problem in max rounds is if I'm down by 2 rounds, if I just have full buy of guns, I can just win every round from there on out. There's no variable factor. It's the same every time if I just win the rounds. Okay, so it's
also if you're behind by 2 points, you can, if your team is really good at slow pushing and you just slow push every time, or you take these long setups, right? You can just keep doing that and you're never punished for it. Whereas if you only had 2 minutes, you'd have to make
exactly. There's no variable.
Decisions.
Playstyle has no effect on the... But here's the key point I'm making, okay, as to why I actually like in Overwatch that they're testing out all the different formats, is because nobody sat down from Valve and said, this is what we're going to use. Valve actually had no say in it. What happened was, because the biggest tournament in the world was an American tournament, and the Americans didn't use charges only, the Americans just said, our tournament isn't charges only. And so because it was way more money, everyone just said, like, well, since we all want to play in that tournament, I guess we should all just change to the format they use. So even though me and a bunch of people who were around back then think it's an inferior format that we used for, 95% of Counter-Strike history, we're stuck with it and it'll never change. And all thanks to Americans, of course. Thanks, guys, as usual, infecting us with your bullshit Coca-Cola, McDonald's culture, ruining all of our shit. And now we're all fat little 8-year-old kids watching Barney or some shit. That's what you did to us in Counter-Strike. So all I'm saying is, bearing in mind there's no experts at the moment who know the implications, I want people to try all the different modes, all the different variables that you can control, and then figure out which ones to keep the same.
Yeah.
Saying that, though, I do think Assault sucks dick. I said all that like I was really open-minded, I thought it was good, but I would instantly delete that from the game, Monty.
I think that it could be good if the respawn issues are changed, because when we see good assault maps, I said this before, it's really back and forth. Like, good assault maps end like 5-4, right? They can be super exciting, but the stalling is crap. It's just the stalling. The stalling bothers me. The map type in and of itself doesn't bother me that much.
Are there good assault maps, Zebbosai?
I actually think Anubis is pretty good. Like, it's fine. Okay. Like, when I look at a game of Anubis, I see, like, okay, we can get it this way. But then, like, Hanamura was sky, okay, so we build Nanoblade.
Okay.
Just, I don't know, we build Nanoblade a bunch of times, and perhaps one or twice we get a bunch of kills, and we can actually get it. Like, it just feels so random. But Anubis feels like you can kind of set up pushes in other way than, like, Volsky and Hanamura. Just feels bad. I think Anubis is pretty good, though.
Okay.
So, what was I going to say about your Counter-Strike rant? Slipped my mind. I was curious, Zebbosai, coming from TF2, so we've asked this. When we talk about different map types, Are there any TF2 map types that you would like? Oh, sorry. Before we get into that, what I wanted to say, Duncan, was that one of the great things about them releasing the custom game browser is that now players can experiment with different ways to play the game by changing a lot of the settings, like tweaking all of the individual settings on how the games operate. So I'm hoping that people are actually able to come up with some really cool changes to some of the game modes via the custom game type that may be translated into competitive later. So that was just piggybacking off your idea of experimentation.
I mean, it's basically like a custom PTR, right? You just get to fuck around with something and see what it's like. And then ideally, if it be caught on, maybe... I mean, here's the thing. It's even better because there's none of those horrible pros who abuse the game, Monty. So it's just normal Joes like you and I playing in that mode. And maybe Jeff Kaplan sees us and he goes, this guy's worse than me. Let me see what he's doing with his heroes. And if I can give him a hand on these pesky heroes like Lucio that don't do anything.
Well, we'll see how it works out. But I am optimistic about that. And so back to the other point. So as a TF2 player, are there game modes from TF2 that you would like to see in Overwatch, or you would like to see adapted or maybe changed in some way to be better with Overwatch? Was there anything that you really liked in TF2 that could be brought over?
In TF2, we basically only played King of Tail and the game mode called 5CP. And I loved 5CP in TF2, but we can't really see it working in Overwatch. We had for a while 2CP in Overwatch 2, but basically 3 points. You had to cap A and B to open up C, but that just got people stopped playing it because it didn't work the same as it is in Overwatch.
Okay.
It just
so why doesn't 5CP? So to be clear, what he's talking about is linear point control, right? So all the 5 points are in a line, and you start fighting over the middle point, and if you take the next point, then you're trying to fight all the way back over to your opponent's side of the map. Correct?
Yeah, that's right. The thing why I can't see it working in Overwatch is because you can't. Like in TF2, you had a bunch of heroes that had mobility, so you could get through choke points, with just mobility. In Overwatch, you could do that if there was no hero limit, but with the hero limit we have, I think just getting through the choke points to be able to get different points is too hard, and teams wouldn't risk losing the middle stage. Cause, I don't know. I just thought the heroes aren't there in Overwatch. I feel, but they are there. You can't stack them.
If they added more utility-based heroes like we're talking about, tanks and supports, do you think that we could get to a place in Overwatch where it would be possible to move through choke points in a more variety of ways in order to make this work?
Yeah, possibly, with more heroes. But where the game is at right now, I don't see it working.
Because a hero like Orisa can help you get through choke points not only with her barrier, but by repositioning the enemy team so they can't defend. Yeah,
that's true. But I know whenever I think about this, I just look at the TF2 map. So that's the only example I have.
Yeah.
So I don't know how it would work in Overwatch. Maybe with a good map design, it could actually work right now, but it's hard to say because there's nothing to base it on.
Okay, so one of the criticisms that people have had of the Overwatch League concept is that it's so pushed back that people almost too early on started thinking everyone's just waiting till the Overwatch League. So at the moment, if you're a Western team, there's barely any LANs. I mean, I think there's a DreamHack that's in the summer. What else even is there? There's those Chinese LANs. There's not really many...
The Chinese one is pretty big.
Yeah, well, it is, but is anyone going to go from the West?
There will be an APAC, yeah. They're having another APAC tournament later on. It's not the Chinese, league, but there's going to be another tournament that Korean and Western teams go to later this year for sure.
So is it a concern at the moment, Zebbosai, that there isn't a full sort of skeleton of a circuit laid out before Overwatch League, so people have something really to practice for and go head-to-head from NA and EU and stuff?
Oh, yeah, I don't know. The game has slowed down so much, I feel. The hype is kind of dying because they're just putting everything into Overwatch League. And last year, we had the game out for half a year, and we still had 6 events.
Yeah.
This year, we've only had Apex so far. There hasn't actually been anything else whatsoever, and there isn't, or to what I'm aware, there isn't really going to be anything else. Perhaps Kaplan or something before Overwatch League starts up. There isn't anything.
Well, but the reason why is because people don't want to invest their resources in a title as a tournament organizer that they're not going to be able to get and nourish in the future. And I do believe that is somewhat silly because we know from what Blizzard has said about Overwatch League that there's going to be basically a 6-month off season every year where independent tournament organizers can run tournaments. So seems like it would be good to start, showing what you can do a little bit to Blizzard. But it's also possible that that's already happened. When Turner came in and did E-League, they're like, look at what we can do for your game, Blizzard. We did a good job. And they'll do it in the future once they figure out what the schedule is. But it's really hard to even schedule around Overwatch League right now because even the time period is so vague. Yeah. It's basically Q3. So if you're a tournament organizer, how are you going to necessarily get the teams and the competition and the time you want and the weekend you want and schedule it around everything else you're doing if you're, say, E-League that now has started going into Street Fighter as well. So you really have to think about that in advance. And I do think that a lot of these tournament organizers are going to come back into Overwatch given enough time, like IEM and E-League, Turner. So it's just a matter of how the scheduling works out around Overwatch League. And I think that another reason, if you're a tournament organizer, so if you start thinking about it from a tournament organizer standpoint, if Blizzard is able to get all of these dudes that were seen at the Overwatch World Cup, like Robert Kraft, who is in pictures sitting next to Bobby Kotick, who's the CEO of Activision Blizzard, in the front row of BlizzCon. If Robert Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots, is going to invest in a team, let's pretend you're DreamHack. Why would you? Yeah, you guys are obviously owned by the Miami Heat now, and that's awesome, and we keep seeing more and more of that movement. But if there's going to be a big announcement where you think you're sitting there and you're DreamHack, you're like, well, I could run an Overwatch tournament now, but if I wait for Blizzard to really blow this up, if I wait for them to make all these big announcements about new owners, and I wait for them to put it in put links to DreamHack in the launcher, and I wait for them to maybe put links to DreamHack and promote it very heavily during the off season after the first season of Overwatch League, once the esports scene gets going in a way that Blizzard wants to promote it, because they don't want to promote anything right now because it's not at the scope has not been unveiled yet. Then I understand why they're not doing anything. They're like, well, why would we do it now? We'll just do it later after Blizzard figures out its shit and makes all their announcements and starts promoting the game very actively. I mean, it's hard to, it sucks. I get it. It really does suck for you guys, the professional players, but it is not in Blizzard or anyone else's best interest to do anything with the competitive scene until everything is actually unveiled.
That does suck, though, because now
it does suck.
now, as soon as someone goes out of Apex, the hype cools off.
Yeah, in Europe and NA, there's no hype basically at all, and I fear that the game will just slow down too much because everyone expects there to be a lot of hype around Overwatch League, obviously.
Sure, yeah.
But you still need a fan base going into Overwatch League that is pretty big, and they're kind of losing some people here, I think.
I actually disagree with you there, because I think that because Blizzard has not promoted esports at all, that we look at it from a perspective of being very hardcore esports people whose our lives and livelihoods are invested in this scene. But I think for the most part, the average fan doesn't even know that there are tournaments happening right now because Blizzard has done nothing to promote them. So when they did promote them, the Overwatch World Cup did well, E-League did well in terms of viewership. So I think a lot of it is going to be Blizzard alerting people to the fact that these tournaments are going on. Because if you are a casual fan, how the fuck do you even know Apex is happening right now?
Yeah, that's true. They're basically not.
How the fuck do you even know it exists? You know what I mean? Where do you go to get that information? You have to be really dedicated to hunt down which tournaments are going on. And if you're also a casual fan and you are paying more attention to the English scene, the lack of production value, the lack of leagues, the lack of shoulder content, promotion of the professional players and their personalities and everything is just not there. How do you get invested in how do I get to be a Zebbosai fan? You know what I mean? There's no interviews with you out there. I mean, you're doing the show now, but it's like if you compare it to a lot of other esports that have so many interviews, or like, Valve making sick documentaries on the Dota players and really showcasing their personalities and turning people into fans and promoting it, just not there yet. And I also think that you say that people are losing interest. Well, if Blizzard goes through with their big plans for Overwatch League and has all these massive announcements and crushes it in terms of production, the scope of the announcement is going to be pretty hype. And I think a lot of those people, even if they're not watching right now and they did watch, let's say they watched E-League and they're like, I liked E-League, but I don't like all these online tournaments and it's hard to watch because we don't have a lot of spectators and et cetera, et cetera. The spectator mode isn't there yet. But if Blizzard announces this huge league and they're like, hey, we fixed the spectator mode issue and here's our fucking giant league launch with all this other cool stuff that we're doing, people are going to at least try it again. You know what I mean? They're not going to be like, fuck that game forever. So, I don't know. I think it's really a complicated situation.
But here's a concern I have as well, is that it also would be in the interest of every person who wants an Overwatch League franchise for there to be a bunch of tournaments leading into Overwatch League. How the fuck are you supposed to know which teams are good? So I'm going to buy a team for millions and then I find out, oh, actually, they were only good 4 months ago, I can see that being a bit flawed.
When Overwatch League starts, you want to build, like, you have something to, like, build a story around. Like, okay, so Misfits won these tournaments the last 3 months. They're going into Overwatch League looking very good. Like, you need something to actually build hype around. And you need tournaments to do that.
Yeah. Like, here's the thing, Monty. If I was Blizzard, what I would have done, I mean, I realize obviously a lot of this stuff they changed on the fly and they've had to come up with new concepts, etc. But I would have had Overwatch League, and then I would have had a mini circuit called Road to Overwatch League, where people played in it, and I did exactly do this. At each one, I'm doing a feature about one team, and you're getting to know them, and you're getting to see them play, and you're gradually sort of building things into the Overwatch League. And then, yes, in Overwatch League, maybe different people buy all the teams, and that's the real league and all the rest of it. But you kind of like done some of the prep work before. Whereas the flaw I feel like here, I don't entirely blame them, is that it's pretty obvious, like all these companies, the people who make the game and then are worried about when you're going to launch a game and sell a game and all the rest is different from the esports people who are trying to figure out the esports structure. So they couldn't match them both up. Like they couldn't make the game wait a year to be ready now. But unfortunately, that disconnect between the two sorts of sides of the company is the gap that we've fallen down that chasm now. We're waiting to be airlifted out.
Yes, that's definitely true. And I do think that your idea around the road to Overwatch League is valuable, but the counter argument to that is if they're expecting a certain level of production quality around the game, or not only a level of production quality, but even they don't want to showcase the game with the spectating mode in its current state, if that is a motivation that Blizzard has, then they're still going to be unhappy with doing any kind of officially sanctioned product that doesn't have all the features or all the quality that they want it to have going in. If Blizzard's end goal is to promote the game in a super polished state for spectators, then obviously now is not the time. And we can say, well, spectating features should have been better from day one, but they needed to release this game for whatever reason, and I don't know what their business people said about when this game needed to be released, because you have to think about competing titles like Paladins that were released around the same time, and what happens if we wait for this game any longer. We can fix the esports stuff later, is what they think. And we're just going to see if that's true or not, basically.
That's a bit extreme, though. Like, that's like the old thing of, like, the perfect is the enemy of the good. There's no guy who's like, oh, this production's not, like, 5% better. I'm out. See it. So if he likes the game and the core qualities, that's true. Okay, maybe you won't get all the extra people that will be added if you added all that stuff. That might bring extra people in. But I think the core fan base would be happy. By the way, I don't know what Blizzard think they're going to do, but I think the top esports organizations are pretty fucking good at what they do.
Yeah. I mean,
they put on good tournaments. They put on big events, and production value is pretty cool. And
look, Blizzard has never said this. This is just me theorizing. Sure. Okay, I'm not trying to put words in Blizzard's mouth here. I'm trying to theorize about why they would not have done this. Because look, fundamentally, I'm playing devil's advocate. I agree with you that a road to Overwatch League would have been super sick, but I don't know why they wouldn't have wanted to do that. Another possibility is they simply didn't have the number of people on staff at the time in order to make that happen and simultaneously plan for Overwatch League, right? That's a huge undertaking. even if you contract out the production, somebody still has to monitor that stuff. You still have to write all the rules for it. You have to come up with the format. You have to run the thing on a day-to-day basis. It's tough. You have to coordinate players' travel to these events.
Is there actually time to have another season of Apex before Overwatch League?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Do you think that is the next move then for all the top teams from the West?
Should be. Depends on OGN and when the exact start of Overwatch League is yet. But Apex is ending in the second weekend, April 8th, is the finals.
Okay.
So if they immediately do promotion, like the next 2 weeks, they could theoretically start a new season of Apex by the end of April, which would mean that they have all of May, June, and July, which theoretically would be enough time before Q3 for Western teams to participate. But that also depends on what happens if, like, we don't even know what the preamble to Overwatch League is going to look like. These players may have to go to their cities, their representative cities, to do photo shoots and fan interaction and that kind of content, in which case it could chip into the actual time.
Like, from your perspective, Zebbosai, what do you see for the next few months? Like, what is the plan for you guys?
Well, I don't know. Like, there isn't really anything. To be honest, there is nothing until Overwatch League. We're just looking forward to that. There might be a LAN before Overwatch League, but that's about it. Perhaps we'll play some online cups, but that isn't too exciting.
See, here's the thing. I think I'm just about bringing concepts together, and finding a meeting of the minds, okay? So I feel like Ajax has inadvertently given us the concept for a Western LAN. We need to have a LAN that invites some of the best Koreans when they're all off from Apex, and it's only on payload maps. And as a result, there's the shot that we need, right? Just give us all NA teams are saying is put me in the game, coach. Just give me a shot at it. I can do it. I can beat them. Also, Zebbosai's already told us, if you know what you're doing, you can beat Meta Athena. So he's hyped up the Europeans there. I just want to see it happen, Monty. I want to see it happen. Sounds fair?
I'd love it. I mean, I'd love to have some more Korean teams come over and actually play in the West, because that hasn't happened in Overwatch League yet, right? All the times the Korean teams have played have been in China or in Korea. It was IEM Gyeonggi, it was Apex, and it was APAC. So I think it'd be really fun to start seeing some of the Korean teams travel internationally to go compete. Like, it was sad to me that IEM Gyeonggi and MLG Vegas were happening at the same time, because it would have been cool to be able to see more international teams attend the event in Vegas.
Okay. I think we're pretty much at the end of the episode now, right? So do you have any burning final topic, Monty?
Well, this is taking place before the LW Blue and Kongdu Panthera match, so we already touched on that a little bit, and I guess we'll talk about semifinals in a different show. We already talked about them a little bit, I suppose, but I don't think we need to go over Apex anymore.
Okay, Zebbosai, I've got a question for you. Who is, right? Fans in general obviously only see the really big names, or they only know the really top team. Who is the most underrated Overwatch player as a pro, in your opinion? Is there someone who you think's like super good and you never see him get any props or never see him get his shine?
I don't know about underrated. I know a bunch that is overrated. But
give me some of them. Start listing them off. Start listing them off. Are any of them not on NA teams?
Maybe like Nesh is an up-and-coming guy. He's like, lives in Germany, but he speaks Russian and has played in a bunch of Russian teams. There's also Kenzie, another Russian that is pretty good, but I don't know. I can't really think of anyone.
Fair enough. Okay. Right, that's the end.